I'm Sacha Gorelik. I have been working with Amazon sellers and Shopify store owners for the last around 5 years. And during that time, I've learned a lot of different things about how different brands will interact differently with their customers. And I've developed this unique framework that people can now use to really clarify their brand message. So what I've learned is that, brands can't always be better, that you can't always make your product have better features. A lot of brands are selling the same type of products. So the question you need to ask yourself really is, how can I be different? And that's where story comes into play. So here's Steve Jobs. And back in 1994, which was when he came back to Apple after working at Pixar, he said the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. And the storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda of an entire generation that is to come. Now, if you take that statement in, it's extremely powerful, very daunting, and is actually more confusing because as a brand selling products, how are you supposed to set the vision and the values and an agenda of an entire generation? That just seems way too much. So I'm going to break that down for you, hopefully. Storytelling is the new buzzword. Everyone is saying, oh, you need to tell more stories. And there's a framework that, everybody's read the book, Story Brand, where they take the hero on a journey, has a problem, meets a guide, goes through a transformation, and either they end in success or failure, and your brand takes the customer on that journey. But the problem is with that framework, in my humble opinion, is that it's very difficult to actually implement it into your brand. You're like, but where am I supposed to use that version of the story? Because that works very well for perhaps a novel or a film or a movie if you're from America. But it doesn't work so well for brand stories. So the question is, where do you even start? This is where I did some digging and discovered that there's actually two completely different types of stories. One is called brand story, which is a very static piece of content that perhaps you put on your website. Who knows whether or not your customers will even read it? Who knows if they even care about it? And then there's the brand narrative. And we need to really understand the difference because it's vital. So, your brand story. Brand stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's usually, telling the story and the dilemma of a character. You might tell your friend a story. When you meet them, that's what we do a lot of the time. Get together and you're like, oh, you won't believe what happened to me. I went to the beach and then I lost my stuff and someone stole it. And it's all this story that happened in the past. And the person you're telling it to is actually not part of the story. They're your audience and they're listening to you. Whereas a narrative is completely different. It's an open-ended sort of values or viewpoints that people can believe in. It's something that can impact the future. And I think that's what Steve Jobs was talking about when he said that you can create a story that will impact the agenda and values of a generation, because he's not talking about a story that happened in the past. He's talking about selling a narrative to your customers. That's something that they can believe in, and then they can become a part of as well, and they feel like they're part of your tribe. And what's really interesting is that you see that with a lot of brands where people, it's almost like not a cult, but they follow those brands. They are so loyal to those brands. They won't buy from anyone else because they really believe in the narrative that they're being sold or told, because we're telling tales here. So according to the dictionary, a narrative is a way of presenting or understanding a situation or a series of events that reflects and promotes a particular viewpoint or set of values. Narrative, I believe, is the story that customers end up telling themselves once they get to know your brand, because not always do you know as a brand what kind of stories people are telling themselves when they interact with your brand or when they buy from you, because every person is going to have sort of a different perspective. And people will actually do crazy things when they really believe in your brand, like jumping off cliffs or camping outside stores. So here's Apple, where people are obsessed with the think different narrative, where they want to be the person who has the latest stuff, that they're willing to literally camp out overnight outside Apple stores when they come out with a new iPhone or new iPads or whatever it is. I myself do not buy from Apple, but I'm an Android girl. Here's another brand, Red Bull gives you wings. So not literally, don't try that at home. This is Felix. I think he's an Australian base jumper, sky jumper, and he jumped from the stratosphere, which is sort of the edge of space, in a campaign that was sponsored by Red Bull. And it's a huge part of all their marketing messages. It's where they get people to believe that if you drink Red Bull, you will have energy, no matter if you've had a whole night partying, or if you've had a really long day at work, or if you just want to, I don't know, get some energy, like from whatever things you've had going on. So if you drink Red Bull, you'll have wings, you'll be able to fly. They were actually sued by someone who said, your brand slogan is very, it's tricking people because it doesn't actually literally give you wings. And so in order to not get into a whole litigation and be, paying people tons of money, they actually said that whoever bought their drinks between a certain year, you can get the money back from the brand because of the value of the drink that you bought, in case you were upset that you didn't actually get a pair of wings after drinking Red Bull. So what are the results of a good, strong narrative? So your brand becomes magnetic. People will want to just naturally, they believe in you. They want to buy from you. They trust you. Your employees know exactly what to do and what to say. Your team collaborates at their best because they believe in this set of values that you're putting out to the world. Your investors are going to believe in you for the long-term success of your company. You're going to look and sound very different from your competitors. And your customers are going to see why it's urgent that they buy your products. For instance, like we saw with Apple, where it's super urgent that we need to be the first ones that have the latest iPhone. So I hope that I made that clear, what the difference between a brand story and a brand narrative is. So a narrative is something for your customers to believe in. It's the story they tell themselves once they get your products. And the brand stories is a way to engage and connect with your customers. A story that you relate or you narrate to them, where they're not actively participating, they're more viewing. And now I know what you're going to ask me. You're going to say, wait, so what is a brand story then? A lot of people come to me and they say, Sacha, can you help me make my brand story? And the answer is yes, I can craft a brand story, but I don't know how helpful it really is for your brand. I don't know what results it really gets for you. I don't know if it's going to increase sales or make you more memorable. So I'm going to now explain all the different things I've just said in a new framework that I've created called the rainforest layers. So as a metaphor, in the rainforest, what you have, this is super interesting, is you have the top layer, which is called the emergent layer. The next layer is the canopy layer. The next layer is actually, the botanical name is the understory layer. And then the final layer is the forest floor. You're probably wondering, okay, Sacha, you've mentioned narrative, you've mentioned storytelling, you've said brand story, and now you're talking about the rainforest. Where is this all going? I'm going to get there. So here we go. The emergence. The emergence is the top layer of the rainforest. And that is actually, you can put this all into a document. It's going to be super helpful for your brand. That is your big, daring, overarching brand narrative. And that is the message and the values that you're putting out to the world that people are just going to somehow through osmosis just believe in if you keep using them. The canopy layer, these are your values, brand values. Perhaps one of your brand values is sustainable products. Perhaps one of your brand values is making people healthier. Perhaps one of your brand values is generosity, where you want to be more generous to your audience and send them, who knows, freebies, or just treat each one like they're the only customer in the world. So what are the values that you have that support your brand narrative and keep you authentic? And that's a really important layer to keep in mind, because without values, I think that a lot of brands can kind of be swayed by new trends or new virtue signaling things that come into the marketplace that might not even fit in to their brand values. So you don't want to sort of go off promoting messages that don't really fit in with your brand. And you've seen, there are actually big brands out there that have made that mistake where they start virtue signaling and saying things that aren't really authentic. The understory layer. So this is the brand story, your static brand story. And this is where you can activate the hero's journey, where they go on, this journey and they meet a guide, which is your brand, and you take them on a transformation. And you can put that, on your website. You can put it on your product packaging. You can put it on an insert. You could share it on social media if it's an interesting story. People sometimes have an interesting backstory to their brand, which is about the founders or the inventors of the product. Sometimes people's stories is about just how they helped one customer, and that sort of, what's the word? It just rolled into a way of helping more and more customers. Who knows? Every brand is going to have a completely different brand story, a static brand story. The forest floor, I love this layer because in the rainforest, the forest floor, you might not be able to see it from on top, but underneath, it's actually teeming with life. It's where all these tiny little insects and microorganisms and fungi and plants and who knows what are alive and moving. And that's really where your brand storytelling is taking place. It's the stories that customers are telling to each other. It's the stories that people are sharing on social media when they use your products. For instance, like I follow this rock climber and she uses this product called penguin fingers, which are these little like ice packs that go on your fingers. And I would never have heard of them if I wasn't following her and seeing the stories that she tells about how she gets injured and she uses these penguin fingers. Your brand can tell the customer stories on social media, on product descriptions. This is really the active storytelling, which is really fun, but it should stay within the same theme that you've used in your narrative, in your values, in your understory. Everything should sort of fit into this one holistic message that if you keep using it over and over again, people are going to remember it. So here are some ways to create a brand narrative. If anyone has ever heard of Simon Sinek, you should look him up because he's incredible. He talks about the why. You have your why, the how you do things, and what you make. So what you make, everyone knows it's the products they manufacture, whether that's in China or in the US or in the UK or wherever you're making them. Maybe you hand make your products. So that's the what you're making. How you're doing it, again, could be more about the benefits, or maybe it's about the branding that you're using. But the why is the promise that you're offering your customers, and it's way, way, way beyond the products that you make. So what are your values? We spoke about that. Do you have a specific ideology that you want to promote to the world? Maybe you want people to be healthier. If you sell, like, who knows, maybe you sell ready-made smoothie packs. I'm just making this up. And maybe your ideology is about getting people to be healthier and have a better impact on the environment. Every brand is going to have different values and different ideologies. Number 3 is what moods and emotions do you want to trigger when people come across your brand? And I think that's really important because it's not something people always think about, because they get kind of stuck in the minutia of storytelling and the benefits and where is the customer going. But does your brand want to energize people? Do you want to fill them with excitement? Do you want to make them cry? Do you want them to feel nostalgia? Do you want them to be happy? Do you want them to feel calm? What fits in with your brand? What kind of emotions do you want people to have? What transformation will people experience when using your products? Who knows? Maybe they'll feel more confident. Maybe they'll feel sexier. Maybe they will feel happier. Maybe they'll feel more productive. Maybe they'll feel more successful. What transformation are they going to achieve when they start using your products? Understand what your audience loves and fears. Love and fear are 2 of the strongest human emotions, and you can really play into that and use it to your advantage. How can you tap into dormant desires that your customers might have? You could do a lot of research and dig into different customer reviews or forums or Facebook groups or videos. Who knows? There are lots of different ways to kind of research your target audience. You can even do interviews with customers and find out what is it they want to achieve, what is it they want from life. Ask them like really, interesting questions. You never know what they might say. Create a vision and a mission statement. This ties into the brand narrative. You can put this in a document, and it keeps you really on a strong, straight path with goals in mind. Because without clear vision and mission statement, you might just end up being really wishy-washy with the type of products you're bringing to market, with the messages that you're putting out there to the world. So having that in a document is something that you can look back to and always make sure that you're going in the right direction. So let's look at some examples. Okay. So Yogi Tea. I love Yogi Tea. They're one of my favorite tea brands because they make me feel happy when I open the tea bags. So they've got here the narrative, which is, with our teas, the yogic wisdom on each tea tag and yoga exercise on each pack, they want to provide inspiration to you every day and contribute to a more peaceful, healthy world full of mindfulness and happiness. So those are part of their brand narrative and their brand values, which is bringing more mindfulness, more consciousness, more happiness to the world. And how do they do that? They do that through storytelling, because they have that on all their tea tags, where they have cute little quotes. This one says, "We are here to love each other, serve each other, and uplift each other." Yesterday, I opened a tea tag that said, "Remember that it's not the lantern that gives you light, it's the candle inside the lantern which lights your path." I'm not sure what that means, but it just made me happy to read it anyway. So that's really just a good example of a brand that really sticks to the narrative that they're trying to put out into the world. Okay, this is a great brand. I'll give you a minute to read it to yourself. It's called Whiskey River Soap. I'll read you the first line. It was founded more than 14 million years ago in the outskirts of ancient Rome by a ragtag group of freelance gladiators, stray dogs, and out-of-work magicians. Yeah, it's clearly not the real story. It's just for fun. It's a joke. It makes people laugh. It's extremely entertaining. And all their products fit into this narrative that, like, you know what? It's okay to be different. You can be a weirdo. You can be funny. You can be ridiculous. And here they have soap for geeks, Wi-Fi scented. No one else understands the scent. And each one they have really funny soaps. They have soap for the middle child. They have soap for Mondays. And it's hilarious because, you know what? There are millions of companies selling soaps, but they're the only brand that tells these really funny stories on their labels. This is a really interesting brand. It's called Fjällräven. They're a European brand. And they have this cute story on their website, which is that their founder, I cannot pronounce the Swedish term, so I'm not even going to try. But he basically loved being outdoors, and that was when the seed for Fjällräven was planted deep in Ark's mind. I hope that's how I say his name. So their products are also extremely, extremely durable. And I was actually speaking to a family member who told me that she did a lot of research before she bought her Fjällräven bag. And one of the things that she saw people saying online was that they were using the same bags that their grandfather used, that their grandfather used it and then it was still in the family and now they still use it because the quality is so amazing. So that's part of the narrative. And then the story that people tell themselves is that I'm buying a bag that's not going to fall apart in 5 seconds. I'm going to use on a lifetime of adventures, and then I'm going to be able to pass that bag along to someone else in my family, which is just a really special message, I think. And it's interesting because you wouldn't think that, like, with outdoors equipment, something that people want to pass along to their family, but there is something really nostalgic about that. It's like, oh, my grandfather used this on like a backpacking trip, who knows where, and you can tell that story to someone else, you know, when you're on your trips. So it's like one story leads to another story, leads to another story, and who knows, and it all starts with the narrative. Okay, I love this brand. It's called Trust the Bum. The Sun Bum brand is a sunscreen brand. And so they have a pretty, I would say, it's not super exciting. There's no plot, there's no problem, there's no nothing actually in their brand story. It's just about a cool group of people who play way too much ping pong, have way too much fun, and they made sunscreen the way they wanted it, and that's what they use. And so their brand narrative is actually really interesting because they write on their website that they don't care what sunscreen you use. They just kind of want you to work less, live more, spend time outside in the sun, and protect your skin. And they say, like, we don't care what brand of sunscreen you use. You can use any brand, but just when you're outdoors and when you're trying to be as cool as us, make sure you put sunscreen on. Here they have trust the bum. What does that mean? It means trust us, the ones who live on the beach and need products that work on even the most intense days in the sun. And that makes you believe in the brand, because all their photography, everything they do, every message, every video they put out into the world is always this brand, and they're always on the beach. They're always doing some, I don't know, cool stuff. They've got some bands going on. They've got, ping pong games going on, and you kind of fall in love with this narrative, and you want to be as cool as them. And what's interesting is that, like, if you're selling sunscreen, you could be like, oh, you should also use it when you go to the pool, or you should also use it when you're tanning in your garden, or whatever it might be. But the thing is, they focus on one specific story and one specific narrative, which is about spending more time on the beach, and they don't get distracted by perhaps other uses for their products. They stick to this one narrative. This is a really funny brand. It's called Angry Orange. And Angry Orange, they sell a pet odor spray. So if anyone owns pets, you know that sometimes pets have accidents. I don't know that. I have children, and my children sometimes have accidents. But pets have accidents. They leave bad smells. And so this is a pet odor removing spray. And their slogan is, smells like heaven, works like hell. And that tells a whole story just in one line. And you immediately know that this product is going to smell amazing in your house, and it's going to work really well on really strong, smelly, disgusting odors. They actually have Snoop Dogg as sort of their brand ambassador, and he's on all of their like branding, on their A+ content, and on their storefront on Amazon, on their website. He's the main character. So if you can, use characters, it doesn't have to be a celebrity. It could even be an animal. If you're selling a pet product, you could make sort of an animal as like your brand mascot. Having a character is another good way of telling stories. Just to sort of sum up, where are you going to tell stories? So here's Buzz Lightyear talking to Woody. Stories are everywhere. You have so many opportunities to tell stories on your product packaging, on product descriptions. I love making landing pages on Shopify that really tell more of a story. Inserts, blogs, websites, landing pages, video campaigns, adverts, email campaigns. Send emails to your customers that tell stories, that tell customer stories, that tell funny stories. I don't know, but tell stories everywhere. In Amazon posts, in your A+ content, you can also use storytelling. And remember that stories do not need to have a beginning and a middle and an end. For instance, like we saw with the slogan of Angry Orange, it said, smells like heaven, works like hell. That's not a story. It's not a beginning and a middle and an end, but it evokes imagination. It fits in with the brand narrative. So think of ways that you can, bring those core messages into everything you're doing, which goes back to the forest floor layer, which we mentioned, which is active storytelling all the time, every interaction, every touch point, along wherever your customer is on their journey. Are they going to encounter different stories? Okay, here's some just ideas. I'm not going to say all of them, but just different ways and strategies that you can use stories for your brand. You can identify customer challenges. You can show understanding if someone's having, a problem. Be empathetic. How can you align with their beliefs? Can you share stories that show that you understand, your customer? So I'll give an example. Like, I enjoy fitness, and most of the brands I see do not align with my values, because like they always show people who don't have kids. They never show sort of products that are friendly for use at home. They don't tell a story of like fit moms. They always show single people. Like, they show young people. So maybe you can tell a story about an older person doing fitness. Maybe you can tell a story about moms doing fitness with their kids at home. Like, think of ways where there's gaps in the market for you to tell stories that really align with your customer values. That was just an example for, if you sell fitness products maybe, and you wanted to target mothers, but make sure that fits in again with the narrative that you've originally put out to the world. Think about emotions. They're on a journey. They'll have a picture of success. Focus on fears and desires. So going back to the fitness example, for me, let's say one of my fears is that I don't want to put on weight. I don't want to become weak. I don't want to be tired. I want to have energy. Like, my picture of success would be feeling super energized, just having 5 minutes to do my exercise, and then have enough energy and be happy with my kids for the rest of the day. Like, I don't know, that's just an example I'm giving, but it's really important to tap into those emotions and those desires that customers might not even realize they have. You can tell customer stories. I think that's a really fun way of bringing your customers into your brand, into your tribe, is sharing their stories, asking them to share stuff on social media, send out an email campaign and say, okay, tell us a really cool story about yourself. Maybe they've traveled somewhere, maybe they speak different languages, maybe they have something funny to share with your audience that you can use. Celebrate success as well. Perhaps you sell a product that's for, I don't know, camping, and because of this product, somebody survived a wilderness trip for however long because of your product. There's so many cool stories you can tell. Here's Daniel Kahneman. He's a behavioral psychologist, and he says storytelling can trick the rational mind into thinking it made a decision that in reality was made by the subconscious. So these decisions, they tend to feel cognitively easy, like they came from the gut, and therefore they just feel right. And that's, sorry, I'm blocking Dan's face. And that's what you want to do when you're telling stories. You want to make it easy. You don't want to make complicated stories and narratives with different messy, I don't know, things going on. Like, keep things simple and make it easy for your customers to feel like it just feels right. Like they just want to buy from you. Like they just immediately trust you naturally. Okay, so if you want some data, I will give you a little bit of data. There's actually some studies about storytelling, about how customers, they've asked customers, do you like brands that tell stories? And there's a study that showed that around, I think 86% of people say they would prefer if brands would tell more stories. But they also said that I think it was like 78% of them couldn't even remember any brand stories. And that's exactly the point, is that customers might not remember the story that you've told, but when they read the story as they're online, as they're shopping, or as they walk into your store, if you have a retail store, if you create an experience, they're going to remember it. For instance, like Starbucks. I don't think people necessarily know the Starbucks story, but they feel something when they go into Starbucks stores, when they drink Starbucks coffee, and that's what kind of experience you want people to have when they interact with your brand. So here's just one piece of data that I found. There was a campaign by John Lewis. It was before Christmas, and they created this video for gifts you can't wait to give, and it cost them about £6 million, I think, and they actually saw a 9.3% increase in sales, pre-Christmas sales, which was £596 million. And again, in 2012, they ran a campaign called The Snowman, which was such a cute clip. If you ever have time, you could look it up on YouTube. It's literally 1 minute, and this 1 minute clip cost them £6 million to make. But it led to a 13% increase in sales, which was £645 million in sales. So I think that is pretty good ROI just by using storytelling in a video campaign. Now, you don't need to necessarily spend £6 million on a video campaign to get a return on investment. Here's a small brand example. I worked on some A+ content on Amazon, and this brand saw an increase of about, close to $1,000 just over 6 days, just by tweaking the text a little bit and making it just that much more about the customer, as opposed to just focusing on the product itself. So think of ways where you can kind of bring the customer into your brand, because you never know, it could have a pretty big impact. So just to sum up the different points that we've said, when you are telling stories, so don't focus on the static brand story. Focus on the overarching brand narrative, which is the emergence, the top of the rainforest. Then you want to focus and make sure you have your brand values straight. Write them down. You should have about 4 or 5, strong brand values. Then comes your static brand story, and then comes brand storytelling, which is the active storytelling that happens when people come into contact with your brand. But the main thing to do is stay consistent and think holistically. For instance, like if we look at Apple, They attempt to ensure every element of your experience or any part of the company, whether you're walking into an Apple store, whether you're buying online, whether you're on their website, whether you're unboxing a product, whether you're using a product, it reflects the central tenets of the brand, which is, we all know, think different. And they want you to feel that you're somehow different and you're sort of ahead of other people. So that's something to remember, that storytelling, it's not just the beginning, the middle, of an end. It's a narrative. It's something that's always happening. It's a way for customers to tell themselves a story. It's something for customers to believe in. And if you stay consistent, you are definitely going to put out a story and a message that people will remember. Now it's your turn to start sharing your own stories, and I can't wait to see what you do and how it impacts your brand and your sales. If anyone has any questions, you can contact me at info@ecommcopywriter.com, or you can go on my website, eComm Copywriter. You can also find Sacha Gorelik on LinkedIn or Facebook if you want, whatever's easier. I'll be very happy to answer questions and even help you craft your brand narratives and put together a playbook that you can follow.